Shabbat Shalom, and this is 10 Minutes of Torah. Not one Moabite king, and not one non-Jewish prophet, but 10 minutes of Torah. Well, this week's Torah portion is Balak, and I think I say every week I love this Torah portion because that's probably true every week. But each one I just see it in a different light than perhaps what comes before, what comes after, and it is amazing the well of knowledge that the Torah imparts to us each and every week. And so this week, Balak tells a fascinating story of the Moabites. The people of Moab were one of the people sitting on the edge of the land of Israel. The Israelites had defeated the Amorites, another group, and they were concerned because the people of Israel, they're in the last years, the last days of wandering in the desert. As a matter of fact, as I mentioned last week, there seems to be very few people left who were in Egypt. Who's left? We have Moses, right? Last week, Aaron and Miriam both died, so they're no longer there, those leaders. And we have Joshua, who's going to lead them into the land of Israel, and Caleb, who was also still alive because he was one of the leaders who had spoken out when the spies went into the land, and he said, it's a tough land. It's a beautiful land. It's a great land, but the people in the land are tough, but we can conquer them. And so for that, Caleb was given the privilege with Joshua, who stood with him, to go into the land of Israel. Just those two, and that's all that is left. So the people are now encamped and looking out towards Israel and getting ready to go in, and they have the Moabites to deal with. Now, the Moabites probably in the area of what we would see as Jordan today. So the king of Moab, there's our king of Moab we mentioned, the one king. He's a really interesting person. His name is Balak, and he's alarmed. He's afraid. Why? Because he saw the strength of the people of Israel and perhaps understood that God was on their side, leading them, if you will. So what does he do? He employs, that's an interesting thing, he purchases the services of Bilam, or sometimes called Balaam. It's the same person, but the Hebrew says Bilam, but every translation says Balaam. It doesn't matter. Same guy. He's a non-Jewish prophet. Now, we're going to discuss that in a minute. But a non-Jewish prophet, do we know that such things exist? The answer is, this Torah portion tells us, yes. Well, he employs Balaam to curse the people of Israel. And 3 separate times he goes to curse them, and instead he praises them. And Balak, who's hired him, right? I hired you to curse the people of Israel, to say how terrible they are. He hired Balaam to curse the people of Israel. And Balaam says, listen, I'm a prophet, and I can only say what God puts into my mouth. And that's interesting. Again, remember, this is a non-Jewish prophet. Well, try as he might to curse them, he can only say the words God puts into his mouth. And finally, on the last time that Balaam goes to curse them and instead praises them, he utters a phrase that many of us are very familiar with. He says, Matovu ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael. How goodly are your tents, O Jacob, meaning the people of Jacob, your dwelling places, O Israel. Well, having failed in his mission, Balaam returns home. And that is where the Torah portion really ends in this great failure of Balaam to curse the people. It doesn't actually quite end there, because once he's gone away, the Torah portion actually ends with the people being, I think I can say the word seduced by the men, more than the women, were seduced by the women of Moab to worship their gods. And that is what will do them, and not these curses, but how the Israelites act. And indeed, it ends with God sending a plague because the people are worshiping an idol. And Pinchas comes and he stabs, he does an act of zealotry. Now, that's an interesting question which we will look at some other time. How is it that zealotry fits into our tradition, if it fits in at all? But in an act of zealotry, he goes and he stabs a prince of the people of Israel and a Moabite woman who, they were, what can I say? They were practicing idol worship through physical contact. How's that? You know what I mean here. There are many instances of worship through sexual activity. So that's what they were doing. Pinchas stabs them both, right? He gets because they're both together, and he gets them in one fell swoop, and the plague ends. So that's how the Torah portion also ends. An interesting part in is what Pinchas does correct or good or not? As I said, for another time. But I want to talk about this concept of the prophet Balaam, because how is it that there is a prophet who's not from the people of Israel? We don't have any other examples of such a prophet. All of the prophets, of course, in the Hebrew Bible are members of the people of Israel. So how is it that the Torah will recognize Balaam? What does that say to us about the Torah's outlook? And it seems to me that Judaism recognizes first here, well, actually not first here, but back in the time of Noah, Judaism recognizes that we don't have a monopoly on truth or even on a relationship to God. Other peoples can have a relationship with God just as we do. And as long as they are good people, as long as they act in ways that are just and righteous without the 613 commandments that we have, but just a few commandments. Actually, they have 7 commandments, but they're derived from Noah. But as long as they're good people, they also can worship God. They also can have a relationship with God. It's a recognition that other religions actually have truth to them. And it is interesting. Could you imagine, you may remember a number of years ago, Jim Carrey had a great movie. Most Jim Carrey movies I like. I think he's really a great actor. It's called Liar, Liar. And the main character he was lying all the time, and something happens, and he must tell the truth each time. Well, could you imagine if that was the case for everybody? Like the prophet, like Jim Carrey's figure in that movie, we had to always tell the truth. We couldn't have a lie come out of our mouths. Well, that's not how life works. Truth is more important to us because you can lie. And so as a prophet, though, you can't. And that is, in a sense, the message here to us is that other religions, if they are being truthful, if they talk about the kinds of values that are important to Judaism, even though they don't have to observe our holidays, even though they don't put on tefillin or say the prayers we do, nevertheless, if they are truthful, then they're legitimate. And Balaam, as a prophet of God, can only speak the truth. So we see him trying to curse them and instead praising them. And that phrase, Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov, how goodly are your tents, O Jacob, that, interestingly, from a non-Jewish prophet, became the very first words that are said traditionally in the morning service. Not words of our own prophets, not words of Moses, not words of the Bible, but words of a non-Jewish prophet speaking the truth. Well, this has been 10 minutes of Torah, not one king of Moab and not one non-Jewish prophet, even if he speaks the truth, but 10 minutes of Torah. Shabbat Shalom.